This video will have spoilers from Blizzard's newly released novel Chronicle Volume 2, so if you don't want spoilers or you don't want to hear anything about it, please click off of this video right now. Chronicle Volume 2: The Fall of the Gorian Empire. In the thousands of years following the events of the war between the Primals and the other races of Draenor, the Evergrowth found its strength permanently crippled due to their war with the Arakoa. This allowed the creatures of Grond's line to grow freely without the threat of the Evergrowth consuming their species. However, the creatures of Grond's line were violent and constantly warred with each other. The Grond kept to themselves and only fought when their hunting grounds were invaded. The Ogron, however, developed tribes and constantly warred with each other, enslaving lesser ogre clans and using the ogre members as cannon fodder in their war against other Ogron tribes. They even sacrificed ogres who were extremely ill, physically weak, and or too old to fight. These sacrifices were made in honor of the Grond in hopes of deterring them from attacking Ogron civilizations. The ogres, however, as you can probably imagine, were not too happy with this shitty-ass lifestyle. The only reason they did not revolt against the Ogron was because the Ogron could easily quash any futile attempt to overpower them. That is, until the Arakoa began contacting the ogres in secret. The Arakoa sought to teach the ogres in the ways of arcane magic so that they could overthrow their Ogron slavers, so that the Arakoa could search the neighboring lands for Apexis crystals which contained knowledge and power. Since the Ogron refused to let the Arakoa do so peacefully, their hopes were that once the ogres seized power from the Ogron, they would then allow the Arakoa to retrieve the crystals. The ogres easily mastered the arcane arts, and under an ogre by the name of Gog, they rallied and ignited a war with the Ogron that nearly destroyed both races. However, it did not. The ogres emerged victorious, and Gog was named king of the bloody land that the ogres had conquered, Goria, translated as Throne of the King. When the war was over, the Arakoa ventured into the lands to retrieve their Apexis crystals, but just like the Ogron, the ogres reacted violently. Gog refused to let any knowledge of power and sorcery slip through his fingers, so he commanded the Arakoa to vacate the lands. When they did not, the ogres brutally murdered a group of them, discouraging any other Arakoa from attempting to venture into ogre lands. Hearing the news of the Ogron's fall, the orcs emerged from hiding and began constructing settlements on the surface of Draenor and splitting into various clans. In time, some orcs, particularly Shadowmoon orcs, would set out on long journeys across the lands where they would start to receive dreams and visions near a set of mountains in Nagrand. What they did not know was that this location, now known as the Throne of the Elements, was where Grond had fallen all those years ago. It is here where the orcs discovered the world's element of earth, air, fire, and water. It is here where shamanism was given rise. The Shadowmoon began spreading their teaching to the other orc clans, and they even created a festival where all of the orcs, regardless of tribe, could come together despite their differences and feast in peace and harmony. This festival was known as the Kosharg Festival, and it taught all orcs the meaning of friendship and family. But as all good things tend to do, they never last forever. The ogres soon became aware of shamanism, and the Gorian leader at the time, an ogre by the name of Imperator Moloch, sent a battalion of ogres to seize the throne of the elements by force. The orcs were furious at this act, but they did not outright attack the ogres. Since the ogres merely drove the orcs away and did not engage in a full-scale massacre, the orcs stayed their blade. This would soon change. As the ogres began using their arcane spellwork to gather any information that they could within the Throne of the Elements, a mix of Grond's energy and the arcane magics the ogres wielded ignited an explosion, killing numerous of Gorian sorcerers and throwing the elements out of balance. The elements cried out to the orcs for aid, and the clans rallied to answer the call. Under the Shadowmoon clan's most elder shaman, Nelgarm, all of the orc clans marched to war against the ogres as a single people. Their first course of action was to reclaim the possession of the Throne of the Elements from the ogres. The orcs chased the Gorian sorcerers away from the sacred grounds with little violence, but by doing this, they had enraged Imperator Moloch. The Gorian king decreed all-out war against the orcish race, and every orc village and encampment that the ogres found were razed to ash, their inhabitants massacred. Moloch had expected this act to instantly strike fear into the orcish people, shattering their resolve and discouraging their will to fight. But it did not. The orcs were motivated to fight even more so by this act. Small groups of orcish raiders began destroying ogre outposts, small fortifications, and severing ogre trade routes until finally, the majority of the ogres were forced to retreat behind the walls of Goria. Goria's defenses, however, were mighty, and the orcs decided that it would be better to starve out the ogres rather than lose many lives by bombarding the walls with attacks and attempting to take Goria. Malak realized that Goria and the ogres were destined to death if they stood by and did nothing, so he had his ogres develop an affliction known as the Red Pox, and after it was developed, he dispersed it amongst the orcish people. This disease was extremely lethal, highly contagious, and most orcs afflicted with the disease would inevitably die. The Red Pox began dismantling the orcish army, infecting most of the healthy warriors, rendering them incapable of combat, and threatening to secure victory for the ogres of Goria. With no choice, the shaman resorted to the only option that they had left, an extremely dangerous option. They pleaded with the already tormented and unstable elements to destroy the city of Goria, thus securing a future for the orcish people and disabling the ogres from further tormenting the elements. The elements answered the orcish call. Fire ignited throughout the city, closing off all escape routes and annihilating the ogre ships. Lightning bombarded the city, striking both structures and ogres alike. And when all of this was finished, the ground beneath Goria wrenched open and consumed Malak, his followers, and Goria itself. The orcish clans witnessed the event, some in awe, others in fear. Regardless of whatever bravery an orcish soldier may possess, no person present that day wished to ever see a similar event again. As for the Gorian Empire, it would never recover. The ogres feared what else may become of them if they retaliated against the orcs, so they did not. The orcs, on the other hand, began expanding and growing. As time passed, the orcs would surpass the ogres, and given time, they would come to dominate Draenor.